Hello, everybody. So, I want to spend some time thinking about biodiversity and the ecosystem function. Basically, how many species do we need in a community to keep the community going and doing what it has been doing? So, I want to start by thinking about imagine going to a forest and you have a choice between three different forests to go to. So, given these pictures, which forest would you want to be able to visit? And I think most people answer definitely that bottom picture, right? And they answer generally what we kind of see is that people want to go into when they were visiting nature, they don't want to just go to a pine plantation like we have over here on the left, right? All of this is just a parkway and nothing much there that would interest people. But this bottom picture down here seems like a really interesting place, right? There's much more diversity, much more just going on. And certainly, there's plenty going on over here in this right picture. But I think generally people kind of have a value of biodiversity. This is particularly true for me, as one of my favorite things to do is travel around the world looking at different types of organisms. I really like wildlife photography. This animal right here is the cutest animal in the world. It's a quokka. They're these little kangaroo type things in Australia that have no fear of people, have no fear of predators, because they don't experience any land, at least on this island where they live, they don't experience any land predators, and they'll just come right up to you, and you're not supposed to touch them, but you can take selfies with them. But I really love biodiversity, right? You all know about that. This picture of this lion here is one of my favorite experiences with an organism where but it doesn't have to be just this large majestic lion. I really like pretty much any type of organism, and so that's for me personally. But there's this idea of valuing how much our economy or how much our ecosystems are worth. And right now, the global estimate that it was done recently shows that our ecosystems, basically the biodiversity that we have on the planet, provide humans with over $140 trillion annually, right? Now, that amount of money is ridiculous, but it shows that biodiversity, whether it's what we have a fishing boat bringing in fish that we're going to eat and pay for, or in this case, plants that are producing. This is wild rice being harvested, but there is monetary value in our biodiversity. So this kind of lecture kind of goes into thinking about why biodiversity is good, but really specifically, how does biodiversity, what role does it have in the functioning of ecosystems? Now, this functioning of ecosystems is kind of a tricky word. Here are two long definitions of it, but ecosystem function is the physical chemical, so that is physical aspects of the habitat, and chemical, then like all the different nitrate, phosphorus, chemical aspects of a habitat. The abiotic processes and biological processes that occur within an ecosystem to maintain life. I think this bottom one is a little bit better. I like that ecosystem function is the collective life activities of organisms and the effects these activities have on the physical chemical conditions of their environment. So basically, how does life change an environment and do things to an environment? And the way it does that is by by the activities here in this case. Feeding, growing, moving, excreting waste, all sorts of things like that. Now, when I teach intro bio for non-majors, I get this question all the time that I basically have this reaction to pretty much every time. But the question is, what does a fill in the blank with an organism do, right? Like, what does a mosquito actually do? Or what does a bat do? Or what does a lion do? Students ask me this all the time, and I really dislike this question because organisms don't have a purpose, right? They are just here, and for them, what they're just going to try to do is replicate more of themselves, right? They're going to just reproduce. We don't want to try to think that there's some purposeful role in these ecosystem level processes. So, like, we don't want to say that, oh, a certain plant, its role is to make nitrogen for the rest of the ecosystem, right? So legumes are plants that fix nitrogen and take atmospheric nitrogen, put it into ammonia and nitrate for other plants. I shouldn't say for other plants. And other plants end up using it, right? But that's not like its purpose. It's just that a group of plants has figured out how to fix nitrogen, and then so they can make their own nitrogen from the air. They can make their own nitrate and ammonia from the air, and they don't have to basically get it from the soil. And that's good for that plant, and it does well because of it. So alfalfa is doing this. Any sort of like beans are going to be doing this. And that's not, again, that isn't saying that those legumes are going to be doing that for anything else. They just do it for themselves because it works for them. So that's, we're not kind of asking this question, what does a fill in the blank species do? Now, a lot of people, though, get ecosystem functions confused with ecosystem services. So an ecosystem function is something like primary productivity, right? So how much energy is flowing through an ecosystem, or how much carbon is fixed by that ecosystem from the atmospheric CO2 into life, or how much, and we shouldn't be thinking of just plants. We should be thinking about how much energy here is flowing through this system with these decomposers over here. They're these scavengers, right? They're going to be doing all sorts of carcass removal functions, which aren't necessarily important for humans. The ecosystem services sides are basically functions that they can be some functions, but they're functions that are directly linked to human well-being. So we kind of split functions into these three groups, which are provisioning, regulating, and cultural. So provisioning is things like, how does an ecosystem provide food for us, or building materials in the case of wood or something? How does it provide clean water for us? Regulating then services are basically, regulating the ecosystems that we live in. One of the reasons why we have air to breathe is because there are plants that are producing oxygen, which is sort of, provisioning, but it also regulates the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that make it possible for us to survive. One of the more nebulous type of ecosystem services are these cultural services. I definitely would go back to this slide here. I definitely relate to that of how, I really get a lot more than just monetary value out of nature and experiencing nature. But there's certainly all sorts of, um, you know, just from recreation here. There's all sorts of people that gain a lot by just going out and having fun in a natural ecosystem. And that's really hard to quantify how much that is worth. All right, with that, then this kind of introduces this idea. We'll talk a little bit more about the nitty gritty of what's going on here in the next lecture.